everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Wendy Yee.
And I'm Chris Yee.
Hey, remember back when Uwe Rosenberg was the hottest game designer in the industry? Well, he's still up there.
I don't think it's appropriate to talk about his physical appearance.
It was not. He came out with a huge game every other year, it seemed. And one of his most popular games, although somewhat divisive, was Glass Road. It was not as big as his other games. It was almost considered medium weight compared to Feast, Frodom, Agricola, etc. Mm-hmm. Well, now his big game in 2024 was Black Forest, which was a reworking and reimagining of Glass Road. Although I don't think anybody would argue that they're different games.
Would argue that they're they are definitely
different games?
So no one would argue that they are. No one would argue that they're the same game.
Okay, this makes more sense.
Okay. Yeah. No, certainly. Glass Road had a card play system. This kind of takes all the cards, puts on it a board and everything.
Yeah, so there's a lot of changes in that. So we're not going to really get into the Glass Road thing too much here, although it might get mentioned from time to time. We'll take a look at it as on its own. Chris is going to show us how to play it.
Here's Black Forest set up on the table. This is going to be one individual player's area here, so you can have up to 4 of these at the table. The resource area as well as the farm board, which, by the way, can extend, so you might need quite a bit of room on your table to hold it all. There are going to be 3 boards on the side here that have different buildings in different categories. Endgame scoring building, as well as these ones over here, which will give you powers throughout the game. They are organized into 3 columns, being more expensive and more powerful further to the right, and they're organized by rows as they pertain to different specific types of resources in the game. Lastly, there's the central board where players will take turns moving around and activating the 2 buildings that they are next to. If players move across one of these areas here that shows a cost, they'll have to spend one of that matching type of resource to move, and they can move as far as they want. If they land in a city with someone else, they'll have to pay them a resource, but otherwise they continue to take actions, and pieces do block each other's spaces. This game does feature Uwe Rosenberg's famous resource wheels here, where players are going to keep track of basic goods that they have on the right side of this arrow over here. As they gain more, they will advance them on more spaces. And once a player has gained one of each good, such that there is an empty space here, the wheel will automatically turn as long as there is room for it to move. That basically means that they've spent one of every one of these resources. They now have 1 fewer, as kept track by these numbers here, and they've turned them into one of every of the advanced resources shown over here. The same thing works here on the left side, the glass-making wheel. As a player earns a resource, they will immediately move this forward. They have turned every one of these basic materials into a glass, and glass can be spent on the more expensive buildings here. On the right side here, these are your provisions to move from town to town on the board, and this wagon allows you to actually change the position of some of the tiles on the board. Player turns are fairly simple in this game. You have 3 steps that you will follow. You can optionally spend one of these commodities, as I mentioned, in order to move 2 of the tiles. This is the traveling merchant here, and you can spend that good to move this person and exchange them with another tile on the board, kind of customizing your action spots. The next thing that you'll do is you will move, and you have to pay the provisions for movement if you decide to move across these lines. And then lastly, you'll take the actions. So here, per different animals that you have in your farm, you can gain resources. Here, the traveling merchant gives you 2 resources of your choice, and every other player will gain 1 of them. So I could gain these 2, every other player would gain 1 pot ash, and then the wheel would advance. And you check for the wheel movement every time you gain resources. There are other actions as well that allow you to do things like move up this little gem here on your player board, on your farm board. As you advance this tracker here, you will gain farm extensions. So once you reach the top of this space here, you'll gain one of those farm extension boards that I showed. You will move this over to the side, and you will load it up with more forests. The forests can hold pigs, these areas can hold cows, but there are other action spaces that will allow you to build these pens here, where you may keep either boars or cows, and they will then be worth a point at the end of the game. The buildings that you can construct also go into these spaces. Certain actions will allow you to destroy features on your landscape, like destroy forests in order to collect wood and have more room now that you can build buildings or other features of your player board. Over the course of the game, as players advance on the right wheel here to this point, they will gain a bonus resource, and they will also place out one of these job tokens. And these job markers will get assigned to a specific spot, and this is just a new area that players can visit. If you make the delivery of all of the goods shown on the right-hand side here, you'll gain all the benefits shown, or pay the goods on the left to gain the goods on the right, and it becomes a new spot on the board. As you further advance on this wheel, then you will also be earning more endgame points as shown by the arrows here. The end of the game is triggered once any player has their resources far enough here that they spend one of these purple resources down and advance it past this line. Players will then score up any of the buildings that they have in their board, animals in pens, as well as how far their arrow points to here. All of the endgame scoring is shown. There's some specialty buildings that will have special scoring at the end as well, and whoever has the most points in their farm is going to be the winner of Black Forest.
So Black Road, it's funny because I want to talk about the wheels first.
Did you say Black Road?
I said Black Road. You're
Black
right.
Road.
I am
Clarify.
now conflating the two games in my mind.
Merchants of the Black Forest.
So Black Forest, the resource wheel. This is not the first time we've seen it. It's probably best known in Orla and Labora, the resource wheel. And was resource wheel in Glass Road? I'm kind of
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
There was, because the left one made the glass, and I feel like the provision wheel, there were two of them. I can't remember offhand what the second one did, but it was a little different. There's multiple resources on the right wheel in this game.
I think it's a clever way to keep track of resources. It's obviously not brand new in this game. I think it's a clever system, but it also feels like a tactical system, but instead of being like a tactical player versus player, it's a tactical for yourself. Like, I don't want to accidentally gain an extra wood because then I will lose one of every resource and gain one of the fancy resources. And so I feel like it requires a different level of thinking ahead.
Yeah, I kind of sneer at it, like in a sense of, I get it, it works fine, but there's something about it that rubs me the wrong way. And that's what it is. That whole, sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to get something because then I lose things, and it doesn't even make sense thematically. But it's
a forced exchange.
Yeah,
Right.
forced exchange, and then the fact that there's one resource that's on both wheels is kind of funky, and then it's like, well, it's elegant on the wheels. Yeah, then you have brick on a track for no reason at all.
Because it's special.
I mean, and you can live with all this stuff. It just is weird to me, right? It feels like this is one of those times we're doing a mechanism to do a mechanism. And for me, it's not my favorite part of the game. It's okay. I don't dislike it, but I don't love it either. It's kind of like, fine, I'll just work within the constraints of the system.
Did you grow up using an abacus?
No, why?
I don't know. It makes me think of that.
Old, I guess. I don't know.
No, it just makes me think of using an abacus. Like,
I
don't
thought
know.
you were saying because I didn't like this.
No, I never grew up using one. So in my mind, like an abacus is
I don't
like,
think
what is the
What are you,
point
one of
of
those
it?
abacus users?
I think I was using abacus for like almost
Okay.
100 years now.
That's fair. That's fair.
But anyhow, so I don't know that I love the wheels much, but I get it. I get that it's there. I'll tell you what I do like, though, is this game gives you freedom. So different games are constrictive or more open. Mm-hmm. And this game, Uwe Rosenberg is being nice to you. You need something, you can get it. You'll find a place to get it. Are you not near that location? Now it's near you, magically. And I don't care on that. I like that
you
sort of
hired
thing.
it out. You were like, hey, merchant people, go get that for me. I'll pay you.
Is that what it is? The merchants bring it over?
That's what I assume so. Because
Okay,
it's
I
that
guess
little
that makes-
wagon symbol.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just to be clear, I don't think there's any theme in this game at all. But I'm having a decent time playing it. But I'm saying that I like this. It's not as stressful as, say, Agricola. You need to get
Few
some
things
stuff.
are.
You're like,
Childbirth
Meh.
is not as stressful as Agricola.
I don't. You can say that. When is he correct? Because I don't think he is. But
Back me up here.
so I like the
Silence.
aspect of the freedom to go around, and the game feels almost not quite lackadaisical. Like, I'm just jaunting around, having a good time, doing this, doing that, rather than, okay, I'm planning 6 moves ahead. Because I'm not.
You really aren't in this game, yeah. Well,
I was going to say you aren't, but also I feel like I don't really have a direction at the beginning. Like you could look at all the buildings and decide which one is face up and fist down and look at the whole system and go, I'm going to go this direction.
Sure.
But really, it's a lot of wandering around until you kind of figure out the system of how things are laid out for the particular game.
I think for me, it's nice that it's very quick moving, right? Turns are incredibly quick. And so sometimes I'm not worried about taking a bad turn. We're like, oh, all I did was got to get 2 resources because it's going to be my turn very quick. Because everyone at the table you can move the cart, you can move, and then take 2 actions, and you're done. And I really like that flow. I agree that it is one of the least stressful of his games, but I find it to be almost too easygoing, where I still feel directionless at the beginning, but even halfway through the game, I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'll get some charcoal now.
Yeah, it's
I
like
guess
a
I'll
blessing
get some potash.
and a curse. It's good
Sure.
because it's easy, but I know a lot of people can get frustrated that, like, what am I doing? I'm like, what do I have a lot of? Wood. Cool, I'll go change wood into that. Hey, now what do I have a lot of? All right, I'll go do that. I got nothing. I'll go get a lot of that. It just feels that way. And yes, the buildings give you some direction, but this feels the most directionless of his games in a while, and I don't dislike that. It doesn't make me love it either. It's just kind of, it's like casual fast food gaming.
Casual fast food Uwe.
Well, as opposed
In a
to
large box.
stressful fast food. But
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm a line cook, right? Trying to drown underneath all the orders and stuff. I feel like I can kind of go do what I want to, but do I want to kind of keep coming back to this one? And that's I think one of the faults of it for me. I think there's a lot
tricky.
about it that's laid out really well. I like the buildings. In fact, the buildings in this one remind me a little bit about A Feast for Odin, where
But with way worse setup. Like way worse setup.
more setup to do, but like the way that they're structured out, the different columns, further column to the right means more expensive, stronger effect. Each of them is laid out in different rows based on what resource they affect. I think that's a nice way to have a lot of stuff out there, but also organize it for the players.
I think when I think about the buildings, I just think about how much time it takes to set them up. Because you have to find the
like
exact
Caverna.
you have to find the exact spot that every single one of them goes and then lay them out and then decide, am I going to flip some? Am I not going to flip some? It just was so much for a game that feels like lackadaisical, and you can just kind of do what you want to do and grab what resources you want to grab and go where you want to go. And then it's like, but there's this huge overload. And usually I don't have a big issue with setup in games, but that's a lot.
I think what you're saying is for how easygoing the game is, it's surprising that there's not that much setup at the beginning.
Yeah, and that part is not fun for me. Especially when I compare it to like A Feast for Odin, where it's all laid out in front of me. And I get those choices without that heavy setup.
There's still a lot of setup in Feast for Odin, but all right. There's all those trays and everything, but okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's kind of a hard one for me to parse as to where it goes. So the last couple Uwe Rosenberg games, I felt did not have a lot of wiggle room in it. What's the bat one called?
Atiwa.
Atiwa.
Tiwa. I felt like I saw everything that game had to offer in just a game or two, and so I want something that gives me more options. This has that. I can do whatever I want. Every game's going to feel different, but strategy is gone for me at least. Maybe people who are much better at games than me will like that, but I'm just playing this tactically. I'm like, I'm going to do the best thing for me now. Yes, my one strategy is I want to build that building. I'll start saving the resources for it. That's kind of where I'm at. And also, if you play with multiple players, the board is changing. Buildings are warping all over the place. That you're never quite sure where something is. It's kind of like if you played Istanbul, but someone could move the pieces once in a while. You're like, well, that little thing I had is gone now.
Yeah.
This doesn't make me sound negative, but it's also kind of liberating. I'm like, meh. Sometimes I'm okay playing a game like that. My only complaint that I don't like is I thought that the boards where you put all the buildings and chop the trees down, the layout of that almost doesn't matter. Sometimes it does.
Yeah, there's like
Very
two
specific
special
buildings,
Yeah.
There's a few things, and then for the most part, I felt, again, like I had too much room. In a lot of these games, I'm like, I need an expansion now. How am I going to build more buildings? In this game, I'm like, well, I just built my 30th expansion. I'm never going to catch up to the, building-wise or chopping trees down.
Or you're just running out of space and you're like, where on the table do I put more expansions?
Oh
Sure.
yeah, table space.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a weird game that I think I would still teach people. It's an easy game to teach, really, other than maybe the wheel and how that works. But just go with the flow. So this is a weird one for me to rate. I'm gonna say 7 because I enjoy it and I would play it. Also, the cover's amazing. Did you see the cover? Okay, that's not included in the rating. But I think the game looks pretty nice on the
There's a
table,
bird on a tree.
and it lets you do fun things without stressing you over so much. If you go into this, though, looking for the next Feast for Odin, Agricola, Le Havre, it's not there. It's also better than Glass Road. Can I say that? No. Most people are going to disagree. In fact, I looked it up. Most fans of Glass Road like Glass Road better. I was
okay.
curious about that. It seems to be the case here. I like this better because I thought Glass Road didn't do enough. I found it to be uninteresting because the options were so small. Black Forest was like, oh, okay, well, we'll give you a lot more. So I enjoy it for what it is, a 7.
Interesting. For me, it is too loose. And so my score is affected by that. It's a 6. Because I don't think that I would really volunteer to teach this one to people. It's an easy teach. A small part of it is the setup. But you know what? That's a distributable task at the table. Hey, grab some building tiles, put them in the numbers where they belong. I think they did a good job trying to make this as easy as possible. We should mention there's a co-designer, Tito Lorenz, who worked on this with Uwe. And I think that they made a nice, smooth game that's not overcomplicated, but I find it to be too meandering and directionless, where as I've come back to it more and more, I'm kind of bored partway through. Not in a bad way, but just kind of I wish there was a little more tension. I wish that I didn't... I wish that I had to plan a few more turns in advance and have more drama and excitement when a really good play comes together. As is, it's fun, and I still will enjoy many of the good parts. I recognize a lot of the nice effort that went into it, but I'm not going to come back. So it's a 6 from me.
Chris wants more excitement in his Euros.
I do.
His plain Euros. So this one's a 7.5 for me.
I was not expecting this.
I know what I was complaining about the setup. No, but I did enjoy the actual game, and setting aside the setup and the fact that the box and the game board are all bigger than it needs to be, and so the actual table presence is massive, and it looks like this huge Feast for Odin style game. You know what I mean? It just looks big. It's too big. But setting aside those things, I did find the gameplay to be enjoyable. I did like that openness. And I think you can strategize, but it definitely is not required. Like, it's not being forced of you. And so I think that could be useful for bringing it into a more mixed audience of not just heavier gamers. And so I think that is a good positive thing. This is never going to reach as high for me as a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of other Uwe games, but just some of those older, very classic Uwe games. I don't see it breaking into my top 100, but I think a 7.5 is a solid score. I think it's a good game. And if you haven't played some of his other games and you're new to this whole worker movement and that kind of stuff, like this, I mean, this is a good starting place, I think.
Well, there you go, folks. That's Black Forest. I like this box so much. Anyway, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Chris Yee.
See you in the forest. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.